Like and subscribe right now, or you're gonna have terrible luck for the next week.
Innovation is what moves us forward. Literally everything around us today wouldn't be what they are if it weren't for the visions and ideas of a few people in the past. The fact is, a lot of ideas in the past were construed as useless and would not work. Decades later, here we are and we can't live without them. In this video, we will take a dive into the past and look at various things that people at the time were sure wouldn't leave a mark. Here are 10 of the dumbest ideas that surprisingly worked. Number 10. Bicycles. Zooming around in cities on two-wheeled vehicles. Is there an idea any dumber than that? That's what people in the 1800s first thought when the first bicycles were made. Even newspaper editorials wrote about them, saying that bicycles are just a temporary fad and cycling would soon be dead. Oh, how wrong they were. Not only did cycling continue on, it was actually responsible for changing the lifestyle of millions, even giving rise to new fads while destroying old fads in the process, especially for women. Many researchers believe that the introduction and the proliferation of bloomers can be linked directly to the bicycle's success. This in turn saw the death of bustles and corsets as a fashion choice for urban women. Cycling is currently experiencing a boom worldwide, most likely because people are slowly getting more aware of the environment and their own health. But let me just give you a fun fact. Scientists still actually don't know how bicycles truly work. Number 9. Warplanes. Since time immemorial, men have probably dreamed of flying. I bet many Neanderthals at the time stare up at the sky to look at the birds happily flying around and thought to themselves, you know, it would be cool if we could do that flying thing. Well, it took hundreds and thousands of years, but their dream had finally come true. The invention of powered flight is one of the most important in recent human history, felt in hundreds of different ways. It gave a way for people to travel to distant parts of the world in a relatively short time, giving rise to the jet setters in the process. And of course, airplanes are now a vital part in any military. But believe it or not, there was once a time when the idea of using an airplane in war was thought of being dumb. Most notable of the critics of the viability of warplanes was Marshal Ferdinand Foch of France, who said back in 1911, and I quote, "Aeroplanes are interesting toys but of no military value," only to be proven wrong just a few short years later when the Italians successfully used warplanes as support for ground troops. In a twist of irony, Foch's name was given to an aircraft carrier many years later. Number 8. Solar energy. We are running low on fossil fuels. That is an irrefutable fact. Hence the scramble to find sources of renewable energy. Chief among these is of course solar energy, but when this idea was put forward in the 1970s, when the world was experiencing an energy crisis, most of the world literally scoffed at the idea, especially by citizens of the United States. In fact, then President Jimmy Carter was mocked by the American populace for installing solar panels on the roof of the White House, and when Ronald Reagan took office, he even had the panels taken down and scrapped. Today, especially with President Biden's declaration of reducing the US production of greenhouse gases in half by 2030, use of solar energy is on the upswing. In 2020, 91 billion kilowatt hours of electricity were produced by harnessing solar energy, and that's in the US alone, and this figure will only increase in the coming years. Number 7. Tablet PCs. You know who has made a ton of money? Steve Jobs. Do you know how he made a hefty part of that money? By selling us iPads. Which is why it's surprising to think that Jobs himself was a primary critic of tablet PCs, thinking the idea to be inherently dumb. He even went on to publicly state in 2003 that tablet PCs aren't going to leave a mark. In a sit-down interview at the All Things Digital conference, Jobs was quoted saying, "It turns out people want keyboards. We'll look at the tablet and we think it's gonna fail." Of course, he ate those words soon after. But then again, he wiped his mouth with a thick wad of $100 bills, so I think he was not too bothered by it. Number 6. Laptops. In the early 1980s, use of personal computers boomed. It quickly became an indispensable tool for both home and office, especially the office. That's why businessmen who were always on the go demanded a portable computer that they can lug around everywhere. Hence, portable PCs were invented. But since they were about as light as a gym bag full of dumbbells and required to be constantly plugged into the mains, they quickly died off. But in 1981, the first commercial laptops were produced, and even if they were a bit on the pricey side, they were a huge hit, at least for a few years. By 1985, the demand for laptops died down, with many complaining that they were too heavy and too expensive. This led to most tech observers to publicly say that laptops were a novel experiment and were going to die out soon enough. Well, I'm still waiting for the funeral. Number 5. The Internet. Nowadays, life would be unbearable without the internet. If it weren't here, where in the world would we get our fix of cat videos and GIFs? Going online is so second nature to us, it's like breathing. But back in the days of dial-up connections and that oh so addicting sound that your computer makes when establishing a web connection, not everyone was predicting its success. In 1995, author Clifford Stoll published Silicon Snake Oil, a book that had dire predictions for the World Wide Web. Here, the author predicted, amongst other things, that e-commerce would fall flat on its face. And he wasn't alone. Many of the industry experts at the time actually shared his views. Number 4. Television. Pretty much every new form of entertainment is going to be called a dumb idea by the previous generation. Take YouTube for instance. A lot of the then older folks simply found it a novelty. Now, there are more millionaires on YouTube than on Wall Street, so suck on that previous generation old folk. But no other form of entertainment was deemed a dumber idea than television. Experimental TV broadcasts began in the 1930s, a time when most families bonded over the radio, listening to the hippest music at the time, the news, serials, and variety shows. People were so convinced that TV wasn't going to work, the New York Times even published an editorial in 1939 stating that TV will never be a serious competitor to radio because, unlike radio, people will have to keep their eyes on the screen at all times, and that the average American family simply didn't have time to do that. They even predicted that TV fad to only last about a decade. Number 3. The automobile. If you are to name the single most important invention that changed people's lives forever, the automobile will definitely be included in your options. Understandable, because it figuratively put the world on wheels, making it getting from point A to point B much quicker, although not quite safer, especially in its early days. Given how cars literally dominate modern city streets, it was once thought to be a dumb idea by a few people, even going as far to say that cars were nothing more than a whimsy and that horses and carriages were the present and the future. And these detractors weren't just ordinary people, but well-educated businessmen. When Henry Ford's lawyer Horace Rockham was offered to purchase stocks at the Ford Motor Company for $5,000, his professional acquaintances dissuaded him, citing the exact same reasons I mentioned earlier. Fortunately, he ignored them and a decade later sold his stock back to Ford for $12 million.
Now it's time for today's best pick.
Today's pick isn't really a life-changing invention, and although it looks kind of dumb, nobody really thought it to be. And it really works and has possibly even saved countless lives and livelihoods. Find out more next. Number 2. Black balls. So, in the photo, you can see people dumping thousands or probably even millions of tiny plastic balls into a man-made lake, probably a dam of some sort. What are they doing this for? Did somebody have the dumb idea to make the world's largest and dullest ball pit? Well, no. There is a perfectly good reason for these guys to do what they're doing. And believe it or not, it's to conserve water. You see, during drought seasons, water reservoirs, dams, and lakes lose a lot of water due to evaporation. And since there are no rains to top off water levels, people had to think of a way to prevent the loss of precious water to evaporation. And that's where the black balls come in. They absorb sunlight, thus preventing evaporation from taking place. The water can then be used for more important things like drinking and farm irrigation. If it weren't for these dumb-looking black balls, water shortages will make short work of agricultural land.
Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it, it really works.
Number 1. Talking movies. For the longest time, movies were solely a treat for the eyes. The music was provided by a live orchestra in the theater, and there was no audible dialogue at all. If you want to know what an actor was saying, you would have to read it. Movie studios and audiences alike were so used to this that when The Jazz Singer, the first movie with a recorded soundtrack, was released in 1927, people thought it was going to be a one-and-done deal. In fact, the president of United Artists said in a 1928 interview with the New York Times that these talkies wouldn't last a year. He was at least right about the time frame, because barely a year after The Jazz Singer, silent films died out completely. Did you ever have a dumb idea that actually worked? Let us know down in the comments below. Also, make sure to hit subscribe as well as the notification bell to receive updates every time we upload new and amazing content just like this. Again, thanks for watching and see you on the next video.